HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Post by Kevin A. Munoz. Read by Rebecca Gibel. Part 1. Closed Doors and High Walls. Day 1. 6 a.m. Every morning it's the same. The roosters start first, then the clucking of all the hens, and by the time I'm out of bed and half-dressed, most of the neighborhood is outside and picking up where they left off the evening before. 10 years on, and I still haven't quite gotten used to the sound of chickens in the morning. But these are good sounds. Reminders that the world is right again, and that all the gears are oiled, and that for all the catastrophic disruptions we've seen, we continue. I open the curtains in my sitting room and go in search of the last of yesterday's bread, which I left somewhere among the books and papers that are still strewn across the carpet. When I can't sleep, I read. And when I read, I eat. It's a habit I picked up after the collapse. I wasn't much of a reader before, but after, with most of the electricity gone and nothing but dead signal on the radios, there was little else to do. By the time I got the idea to go to the DeKalb County Public Library, most of the good books had been liberated, so I had to be happy with obscure works on technical subjects. But no matter. When I can't sleep, I read. I have learned a lot in 10 years, and some of it has even been valuable to me in my new line of work. The bread has gone dry, which I expected, but I bite through it anyway. If I want anything fresh, I'll have to be down at the station by the time Regina Weeks's daughter brings her daily delivery. After I find a shirt clean enough to wear, I dip a ladle into the water barrel where my townhome's refrigerator once stood. There is a knock on the door as I'm closing the cover. Deputy Adelaide Luther is leaning against the door jamb when I answer, looking no less haggard than she does on most mornings. She doesn't wake easily, and she likes to tell me that without a shower in the morning she's useless for the first 3 hours of the day. Of course, we don't get many showers anymore. I marvel that someone who was young enough to be going through puberty during the collapse can look so unkempt. Most people her age have handled the changes far better than my generation. She pushes her dirty blonde hair away from her eyes as I open the door wide. "The sweep team wants us at the tunnel blockade," she says. "I've already sent for Pritchard and Cloves. We have visitors, the regular kind." I go back into the bedroom and gather the rest of my clothes, which are all a few days overdue for a washing. I strap on my wristwatch and wind it a few times. After shrugging on my old Coast Guard reefer coat, my only concession to any kind of uniform, I belt my knife and my SIG P229 service pistol. I have rarely had to draw my sidearm. It's mostly for show, and a reminder of an old life that looked very different. Grumbling, I shut the door behind me. Unlike my deputy, I am very much a morning person, but I still need my breakfast, and it's looking like I won't get anything to eat for a while. I look longingly past Luther down to the corn and bean fields growing in the reclaimed Freedom Park just beyond my house. I live on the northern side of the Little Five, with only the fields beyond. A quick walk from my townhome's front door will get me to the Carter Center barricade wall, which holds back whatever still roams Ralph McGill Boulevard in the midtown heart of the city. I've heard rumors that a group has reclaimed the hotels, which would make sense, but I've been hearing those rumors for years, and every time we send out scouts to confirm it, they come back with the same story of shriekers and hollowheads. In a way, that's to our advantage, and it's one of the reasons the people of the Little Five have chosen to stay. Grady Hospital and the hotels have been infested since the collapse, making the Little Five something of an island in a sea of monsters. We rarely get unexpected visitors. It takes guts to walk through that gauntlet. The only safe approach is through the tunnel that goes under the railroad tracks on the south side of our perimeter. Luther and I walk through the center of the Little Five, along Moreland Avenue, into the morning bustle that has been a part of the rhythm of the new Atlanta for a decade. Most of the city was abandoned during the collapse, left to the horrors of the infected after the last of the world's foundations crumbled. And for a time, the remaining Atlantans made forays into other parts of the city to collect food and weapons and whatever else was needed to rebuild society. But now, 10 years on, we stay where we finally laid our burdens down. This is my home. I was not born here, not within 800 miles of here, but I can think of no better place to spend the second half of my life. The people of the Little Five are good people, and they took me on as their chief of police. They knew I'd been in the Coast Guard for 6 years before the collapse when they asked me. I haven't seen ocean in a decade, and even before that my job experience wasn't what one would call local law enforcement, but the powers that be in this place saw an opportunity when I arrived at their makeshift fences with my daughter in tow. With 3 officers under my command, I keep the place safe and under control most of the time. Petty theft and domestic disturbance take up the bulk of my attention these days, though from time to time we get miscreants looking to steal food and equipment. They rarely make it past our perimeter fence. The Little Five takes its name from the 5-point intersection at the heart of the neighborhood, and it is here that most of the day's activity occurs. With the old shops having been converted to housing and the upper-floor apartments packed full with families, business happens outside, on the sidewalks and in the plaza, well into late fall. We tried a few years back to reclaim the nearby Edgewood Shopping Center, more for housing than for shop space, but we found it to be inconvenient. The spaces were simply too large. Children are playing in the street, some inscrutable concoction involving an old soccer ball and stacked truck tires that might charitably be called a game. I envy them sometimes. They don't have to worry about cars or strangers in vans or any of the perils I knew or was told about when I was young. But most of the time I remain aware of how constrained their lives will be. There are only a couple dozen of them here, maybe half of Little Five's under-18 population, and they will never know the thrill of meeting schools full of kids their age, or stealing their parents' car keys on a hot summer night. But I suppose they don't care, and won't miss what they never had in the first place. The handful of children under the age of 10 have never lived in any other world. Even the old ones hardly remember their lives before. And all around them, the Little Five's shop stalls are crowded with the business of barter and exchange. The busiest of these is always Regina's. The community's most prolific baker, she has become something of an institution here, and she operates her large stall while her 16-year-old daughter handles deliveries. Although Luther is impatient to get to the tunnel wall, I linger a moment at Regina's stall, since I know I won't be getting any of her bread until I'm back at the station. The aroma is familiar and comforting. Perhaps that's because it doesn't remind me of anything from before the collapse. I never experienced freshly baked bread until settling here. I imagine it smells like the inside of a Western homestead or a winter-bound New England farmhouse from 2 centuries ago, and a lot like a home should smell. Regina is a tall woman, maybe 10 years older than I am, 50 or so, with close-cropped white hair and a strong Georgia drawl that belies her pre-collapse radicalism. The story goes that she was raised by anti-war domestic terrorists who once narrowly escaped arrest for firebombing a police station in Eugene, Oregon. Regina herself is nothing but gracious to me. "I hear we have people coming up from 20, she says in a whisper. She means Interstate 20, which connects with Moreland Avenue about a mile south of the tunnel and serves as a safer corridor for people passing through the city on their way west or east, to Alabama or the sea. "Word travels fast," says Luther, who is pacing impatiently behind me. "Faster than we do, anyway." "You get on then, Chief," says the baker. I'll make sure you have something warm when you get back. She winks at me, part of an old joke between us. What she's insinuating is not a serious proposal. Regina's husband, the mayor, would be a little put out. The old parking lot on the northbound side of the main street has been converted into a biodiesel farm, operated by a young couple who were at Georgia Tech before the collapse. When the world's oil began to go sour at the beginning of the end, the Green Power lobby surged to the front pages and began recruiting the best and brightest from around the country. Ernesto Vargas and Belinda Braithwaite were among them, along with Micah Abraham's solar panel crew, which provides most of our electricity. They have kept the power on and some of the vehicles running for a few years now. Braithwaite is the true eccentric among the three green barons, the rest of the power company as they like to call themselves. Her hair flies around her head like a curly, bedraggled halo, and she wanders the streets at night barefoot and muttering under her breath. But she's not crazy, as far as I can tell. She talks to herself to solve problems, and she's told me more than once that she's an insomniac. She also likes to ask questions, and as Luther and I pass by the farm on the way to the tunnel, she is already on the sidewalk ready to interrogate me. So it's true? People be on the wall? On foot? She shoves her thick glasses back up the bridge of her nose. That's what I'm told. Ask them if they have any copper wire. We're running low, and I'd really like to have spare wire in case Luco has trouble again. Luco is a white Volvo station wagon. Oh, and glow plugs. That's what we really need, but they probably don't have those. No one bothers to keep them around if they don't know what they are. I'll ask, but I don't think they came bearing car parts. I walk more briskly, following Luther, until it occurs to Braithwaite that I'm in a hurry, and she wanders back onto her property, still asking questions but no longer directing them at me. The tunnel is just beyond the biodiesel farm, and the tunnel wall is 1/3 of the way through on both northbound and southbound sides. We built the wall closer to our side of the tunnel so that we would have some measure of control if any shriekers found their way here and decided to call their friends. Most days we only get 1 or 2 hollowheads, and if they come too close, they're easily dispatched with arrows. There is always 1 rifleman from the sweep team on the wall as well, but they spend most of their days playing solitaire. Mayor Aloysius Weeks is waiting for us with my other 2 officers, Pritchard and Cloves. Pritchard has about 20 years on me, but he's a good shot. I brought him on mainly to satisfy the previous mayor's paranoia about an invasion of the infected. Pritch has done a good job keeping the peace since then, so I haven't seen any reason to let him go. And Augustus Cloves was my idea. A big, powerful black man with an intimidating voice, he styles himself as my enforcer whenever someone winds up too drunk to go home quietly at 3 a.m. I like to tell myself that in his pre-collapse life, he had a paradoxically benign occupation, like a certified public accountant. But it doesn't matter. The end of the world changes a person. I've never seen an exception to that rule. Mayor Weeks is Regina's husband, but if I didn't already know that, I would never have guessed it. Where Regina is friendly and forthcoming, Weeks is closed off, reticent. He never says anything with 10 words that he could say with none. I find this to be an admirable quality in a politician. There is a much lower risk of hearing a lie. Perhaps it comes from his time as a professor before the collapse. He told me once that he used to teach a subject called Southeast Asian Religions. One of his books is near the bottom of a stack I haven't read yet. The mayor shakes my hand as I approach the tunnel door. A young girl, maybe 14, and a man, 30s, with a shotgun. So that's why I was called out here. With a few quick gestures, I position Pritch and Cloves on the upper platform and Luther at the reinforced door at ground level. Pritch and Cloves make themselves visible and draw their weapons. Once they're in position, I spin the combination lock to the door and pull off the chain. I step through, and for the first time in what feels like ages, I am outside the Little Five. I keep my own weapon holstered and my arms relaxed at my sides. Luther closes the door and locks it behind me. Before I approach the strangers, I scan past them at the light beyond the tunnel, checking for signs of hangers-on. Of course, if the strangers had made enough noise to be noticed by a group of hollowheads, they wouldn't have gotten as far as the tunnel wall. Clearly, they were careful. If there are any roaming hordes nearby, they're here by chance alone. "Good morning," I say, keeping my body language as non-threatening as possible. The young woman is pregnant. That's easy enough to see. She's at least 7 months along. Her clothes are torn and dirty. Her shoes are missing shoelaces and held together with old duct tape. She hasn't washed in days at least. She looks hungry, perhaps confused. The man is not much better, but he at least seems to have his wits. Weeks was right. He's in his late 20s or early 30s. He holds his shotgun like a hunter, with the stock under his shoulder and his hand under the barrel. He carries it like it's loaded, though, and when he answers my greeting, he swings the barrel a few inches in my direction. "Good morning," he replies, looking up at the upper platform where Pritch and Cloves are watching. His accent suggests he's from South Carolina. "We don't mean any harm. We weren't sure there was anyone still living here. But we could use some food and shelter, and the girl could use a place to rest." Back in the early days, we let in anyone who found us and counted ourselves lucky that we had one more person who could help us rebuild. From time to time, that turned out to be a bad idea, but on balance, it worked for us. I myself was one of the first people let through what was a much smaller wall at the time. Even Mayor Weeks didn't arrive until a few years after we'd built the perimeter fence. The fact that the man has a shotgun doesn't suggest anything other than that he has a head on his shoulders. Outside of the protected neighborhoods, Atlanta and presumably the rest of Georgia and maybe the whole continent are unsafe for travelers on foot. Hollowheads haven't been as much of a problem recently in this area, but I don't know how far these two have traveled, so I choose to give them the benefit of the doubt. "If you're willing to let us secure that weapon until you leave, I'll consider letting you through the wall." It sounds reasonable enough, but most men in his position wouldn't take me at my word. He doesn't know anything about us. If we take away his only protection, that will leave him vulnerable to whatever we might want to do with him, or to the girl with him. I expect him to try to bargain with me, to find a way to keep his weapon and still be permitted inside. But he offers no resistance to my demand, setting his shotgun on the ground and pushing it out of reach with the toe of his badly worn boot. I glance back at my men on the wall. They have the same curious expression that I must be wearing. They're as familiar as I am with how this dance is supposed to go. "Do you have a doctor?" the stranger asks. I rest the palm of my hand on my holstered pistol and look over the young woman a second time. She looks far too young to be carrying a child, but I've seen younger. The combination of a collapsed population and no functioning condom factories makes for a lot of teen mothers these days. We don't exactly encourage pregnancy, but we can't quite bring ourselves to show righteous indignation when it happens. We need the babies more than we need the morality. But none of that is what worries me. Doctors mean illness, and that could mean fever. And fever drags along with it the potential for something worse. At last count, the Little Five boasted a population of 600, and 4 people whom we call doctors. I wish we had twice as many. They are indispensable to us. The man must realize that I'm giving his companion more scrutiny as he says, "The last doc she saw said she has..." And now he says the word carefully, to be sure not to make a mistake. "Pre-eclampsia." The air goes thin in my lungs. Had someone else been standing here in my position, the man might have needed to say more, to plead more. But I know the word. I lost my wife 2 years before the collapse, and nearly lost my unborn daughter because of what preeclampsia can become. The thought of this young woman suffering from seizures and stroke is enough to goad me into action. "Luther!" I shout. "Open the door!" The chain rattles against the metal, and the door swings open with a low creak. I usher the strangers in, and as the woman passes me, I think I can hear her whisper thank you. I am about to follow them back into the little 5 when I spot another figure moving on the far side of the tunnel. "Is anyone else with you?" I hiss at the man. He says no, and I draw my weapon. I aim in the direction of the newest visitor, knowing that my officers will understand the gesture. It doesn't take long before Pritchard grabs binoculars and identifies what I'm seeing.
"Looks like a hollowhead, Chief,"
he says in his usual raspy homespun tone. My skin crawls under my coat. If handled calmly, a lone hollowhead is not a real threat. But we don't handle them calmly, even after all this time. They look like human beings, but they behave like animals. And on some unfortunate occasions, one or more of us will recognize a friend or loved one who was lost to us long ago. We try to think of them as being already dead. I'm sure I'm not alone in feeling a complex combination of relief and remorse every time I have to shoot one. They may be empty shells, but they were once like us, and they are most certainly still alive. In the depths of our gallows humor, we sometimes wish they were truly the living dead. Then, at least, we could put them down without feeling like monsters. Instead, they are hollowheads. The pandemic that ended the world made its mark by consuming chunks of its victims' brains. The parts that control the higher functions are little more than slop, sloshing around inside the cranium. Personality is gone. Memory is gone. Gone, too, are all the cares of the world and all vestiges of civilization. There is no cure. There was never going to be any cure. When the hollowheads first appeared, the good oil was all but gone, and we were already out of time. Braithwaite and one or two of the other mathematically inclined eggheads in the little 5 once did what they called a back-of-the-envelope calculation and figured that 90% of the world's population succumbed to the disease. The entire world's survivors, then, were less than twice the population of pre-collapse America, less than the population of India. Of the 10 million people who lived in Georgia before, fewer than 1 million survived. How many are still alive today is impossible to know. The hollowheads are survivors too, but they survive in a different world from ours, and they don't do back-of-the-envelope calculations, or remember that there once was an India, or an America, or a Georgia. They travel in packs most of the time, but have just enough brain power to send off scouts in pairs and threes to search for food, wild dogs, cats, deer, the occasional goat, and people. They also seem to be able to tell the difference between the run-of-the-mill hollowhead and the shriekers, and use shriekers as scouts when they can. Most hollowheads don't make noise. They remain uncannily silent, even when they're agitated. A few, though, maybe 1 in 20, still know how to scream. And because they don't care about their voices and don't have the usual social anxieties about looking foolish in public, when they scream, louder than anyone I've ever heard. We make sure to put shriekers down quickly. Remorse and self-doubt be damned. The hollowhead at the far end of the tunnel looks to be alone. It's female, wearing rags that were once proper clothes, with blood-caked bare feet. For whatever reason, the infection is a jealous god, and hollowheads don't get sick like the rest of us. They don't get tetanus, they don't die of gangrene, they don't suffer from any of the ailments that come from being bruised, scratched, stabbed, or cut. They can bleed out like anyone, and if they get gut shot, they will eventually die of starvation or blood loss. But I've been assured by people who claim to know that hollowheads don't even die from having their own shit seep into the bloodstream. Frostbite still affects them, even if their limbs won't rot, and some of our scouts have seen them chewing off their own dead arms. But even that is only helpful to people living in the north. Here in old Georgia, where the coldest day is like a Pennsylvania spring morning, it's not enough. This hollowhead is intact, all of its parts in the right places, which makes it more dangerous than the average. Still, I'm the one with the pistol. I wait and watch to see if it realizes I'm here, but all it does is shamble from one side of the tunnel to the other, munching on something hanging from its mouth. A rat, maybe. Because hollowheads operate entirely on instinct, I can't rely on this one feeling full and deciding not to bother with me. If it sees prey, it will attack, full stomach or no. And if it's a shrieker, it will alert its pack. Shooting a gun attracts hollowheads only about half the time. Maybe the sound isn't natural enough, or it reminds their hollowed-out brains of thunder. No one knows. They certainly chase after voices, loud footsteps, biodiesel engines, and just about anything else. Even so, I don't want to waste a bullet at this distance, with this light. I inch forward, keeping as quiet as I can, trying to stay out of its field of vision. It reaches the northbound side of the tunnel and stops to rub against the concrete, like a dog scratching an itch. A few steps closer and I will be confident I can get a good shot to the chest. But that's not enough. I need to shoot the head. If she's a shrieker and I leave her with one good lung, she can still cry out in the few moments she has before she dies. A perverse part of me wants to holster the pistol and use my knife, but I'm not that stupid. Being bitten by a hollowhead is almost always a death sentence. Sepsis sets in, the fever comes, and then you get 6 hours of feeling better than you ever have before, as every bad bug in your system is eradicated by the resurgent infection. But from there, the descent is quick, as your brain melts away in your skull. I've seen it happen more than a few times, and the worst part, without question, is being aware of your own devolution. It's like suffering from an aggressive dementia that destroys you between breaths. The hollowhead stops pressing against the wall and turns, its glassy eyes finding me at last. Its shambling motions give way to the instincts of a predator in sight of large prey, and it propels itself toward me, arms reaching, blood-caked hands grasping for me. It shows blackened teeth and opens its mouth to scream, but I lodge a bullet in its throat. The body collapses immediately, a gurgling sound pouring out of its neck along with the blood. My gun arm feels heavy, as if the moral ambiguities had weight. One would think that after 10 years this would get easier. And maybe it has. Just not enough. I don't recognize the one I've killed, but she, used to belong somewhere. Her face once made her mother smile. I take a deep breath and remind myself not to think about such things. I holster my weapon and return to the wall, fetching the stranger's shotgun along the way. Luther chains and locks the door behind me, and my other officers come down from the upper deck. Before I turn my attention back to the visitors, I tell the guards on duty to watch for more hollowhead scouts and to clear the body from the road. The pregnant girl is seated on the curb. The man hovers nearby while the mayor tries to coax some words out of his companion. But she says nothing. When I approach, the man steps in front of her and reaches out a hand. I don't offer mine in return, but he is undeterred.
"Thank you,"
he says with apparent sincerity.
"I promise, we won't be any trouble to you."
I'll have to judge that for myself, I say, trying not to sound too skeptical. I'll have some questions for you, to figure out what your story is and to make sure you're not running a con of some kind. Mayor Weeks turns to the man.
"We will make sure you have clean clothes, food, and a bed for the night,"
he says.
"But,"
he adds with a nod toward me,
Chief Edison will need to be satisfied. We can take your friend to our doctor now if you'll...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?